First question, what was the best thing about the Rings of Power? Probably Adar. Morgoth captured elves that had not gone to Valinor, the Dark Elves, and tortured them in the torture chambers and pits of Utumno and Angband and created orcs.
Milked their essence. Kind of like the Dark Crystal.
And the fact that Adar has that as his origin is cool. But completely Tolkien-esque. So,
but again, that was like one where I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, they got something right.
They got something right. Yes, that would have been cool if they had just kind of made a story like that.
Right.
They don't need to name drop. Who cares? They don't need to populate this story with like the all-star team.
Right.
You know what I mean? From the Lord of the Rings or from the Legendarium or from the Second or Third Age. They don't need the all-star team. They don't. Why populate it with an Elrond or a Gil-galad? I mean, maybe in the future episodes, but it could just start out like small. Start small with a cool story about this guy Adar, and then his relationships with his orcs and I don't know. I am rewriting the whole thing.
You're right.
But they tried to do all these things with like, and let's have Galadriel in there, and Gil-galad, and Sauron, and
I think
Gandalf.
honestly, the thing that Tolkien did with the Lord of the Rings, right, is that when he wrote it from very Hobbit-centric, right? Because the Hobbits were the reader. This is what we understood. You know what I'm talking about?
Right. The Hobbits were us.
The Hobbits were us.
We were at the Hobbit level.
Yeah. Yeah. Bilbo and Frodo and Sam, they were all, they were like, that's who, as a reader, we identified with. That's where that's why it was There and Back Again and, Hobbit's Holiday, whatever you want to call it. Right. Because I think like a story from Galadriel, her point of view is like very foreign to like the reader sensibility. They should have carried that through. You know what I'm talking about? Instead, they chose to kind of humanize the elves, and it just didn't work.
Yeah,
it was like,
I'd rather have elves. The elves are supposed to be kind of lofty and mystical, and they humanized the elves. They kind of made the elves more mundane, and it broke all the charm for me. So,
and honestly, since they were okay, let me finish this one thought?
Of course.
I'm so sorry. Nori should have been the main character. Everything should have been experienced through the eyes of Nori.
More or less.
What I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Or the Harfoots. The Harfoot should have been like.
But if they did that, the Harfoots needed to be developed.
Right, but they could have. They
into
should
more
have
interesting
developed them.
People.
Right, they should have like given it more thought instead of like fans like I don't even know if it's fan service, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't fan service. It was more of like, well, we got to show the Hobbits some. We got to give some we got to give the people who are familiar with Tolkien's world, something to hang their hat on, and
I think they didn't. I don't think they had to do it from a Hobbit centric perspective. Although that would have solved a lot of problems. I mean, it's possible that would have been one option that they could have pursued.
Or they do it from Elendil's perspective, or if they want to make it really interesting, do it from Halbrand's perspective.
Adar or Halbrand's perspective. Here's the thing: I think they needed to have it from an evil character's perspective, or a human being's perspective, or a Hobbit's perspective, or a Harfoot's perspective.
Right.
In other words, like someone that's slightly corrupted. An evil person is corrupted because they're evil, like a Halbrand or a Adar. A human is corrupted because they are imperfect and mortal, and a Harfoot is corrupted because they're earthy, and they're not these exalted elven beings. But when you have the elf when you have like the Mary Sue elf as your main character, it's going to cause so many problems because people can't relate to it. In order to relate to it, you have to make it more mundane. But people don't want that in their elves, and so you're screwed.
They went through great lengths to make this world that they created, the Second Age, feel really, really, really similar to what Peter Jackson has created.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So it's like there's a
I mean, in
familiar
some ways,
look
like
to
we
it.
said in the very first episode that we put out about this series, is that it looks gorgeous in a lot of ways, but then
Yeah.
there's times when it just looks super cheap too. Like when there's these beautiful towns of Eregion and they're completely not populated with any activity or people. It's like, what, you couldn't
Right.
afford extras, or why aren't you bringing this to life for us to make it
Yeah,
seem like a real
yeah.
place? And where's everybody?
They didn't have enough money to put extras in there. I don't know.
Let me just compare it with like Vikings, for instance. You know, you go to these little Viking towns and there's just people all over the place, and they're like
Right.
selling fish, and they're squatting, and they're, you know, chastising the children, and they're running after barrels and
Oh,
chasing.
Dennis, there's some lovely filth down here.
Yeah, they're talking about there's lovely filth down here, and they're putting out their laundry,
Right.
and I'm like, it gave a sense of like a sense of reality.
Yeah.
But there were a few crowds in. I've seen a review episode of someone saying how like they copied and pasted people. Have you seen that? Like a crowd scene in the Southlands. Like
No.
there's like people that were copied and pasted. Like literally, like they took a crowd of 20 people and they made it look like a crowd of 80 people. By copying and pasting human beings in different patterns and configurations. Like, no, this guy's the same as this guy. There's just copied and pasted.
You know,
So why were they so cheap on hiring some extras for this show? Like you have just the principal main characters coming
honestly,
and going on a stage.
in all fairness, when like in Rivendell and in Lothlorien and everything, like in the Jackson movies, there wasn't a whole lot of
Right.
movement going on. But when you go to Bree in the Jackson movies, there's
Right. I'm thinking like Bree or Lake Town. Think of Lake Town.
Yeah.
It was like a real place, with a lot of weird characters and a lot of like, pickpockets, cutthroats, weirdos. I would have rather had cheaper looking like architecture and just people like populate these places so they seem like actual places.
Okay, so these creators and the showrunners and all that stuff made it a point to make Middle Earth look like Peter Jackson's Middle Earth.
Pretty much.
Right. I mean, it's recognizable as Middle Earth.
With some Art Nouveau like innovations that weren't so much in Peter Jackson.
Right. But that's where the similarities end. I would have, again, to go off your point, I would have much rather them not had such elaborate sets.
Yes.
Right. And had more of a realistic, again, that's why I think the orcs were so effective, because they were dudes in masks. It was like practical effects.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like this is not. And if you're going to make the elves look all grandiose and like this, then make them act accordingly. I think, again, and you brought this up, there was absolutely no sense of danger of anything like remotely bad happening. I mean, the only person who died, aside from some orcs and some townspeople that we didn't give a shit about, was Sadok.
A few people died.
To work with.
Like, so Elendil's or Isildur's friend.
Okay, yeah, he did. But again, who gives a shit? Who gives a shit?
Right, who was like the bumpkin, who was the butt of everyone's jokes, and who always came in last, and like kind of saw it coming.
No kidding, he's gonna die.
Right, and then the guy that Adar told
the kid, right,
Waldreg to kill the kid.
Yeah, who cares though? Again,
but that was like the same as Isildur's bumbling friend. It was like the expendable one.
Right.
They take these runts and they write them as expendable characters, and people who are like, oh look, he always comes in last. He's the bumbling. He's the butt of every joke. He's morally suspect.
And like, dude, he signed his own death warrant when he's like, I've seen enough of war.
Right.
I've seen, it's like, no, okay, that guy's gonna die. you know what I'm talking about? Again, surprise me, please.
Surprise me, yeah. And the other thing, real quick. Another way that having the action be at eye level as a Hobbit, like Lord of the Rings, it's at the Hobbit level. and the Hobbit is at the Hobbit level, obviously. It creates a sense of hierarchy and a sense of like, when you're at the Hobbit level, you're at the familiar level of the natural world, right?
Right.
But there's all these beings above you. Like there's the elves and the Maiar and the Vanyar and there's
The
Iluvatar.
Teleri.
And so you have this, and that creates a sense of depth, a sense of mystery. And then you have even
Right.
the evil things, the lowly things. Like this, like everyone felt kind of at the same level. Like there was no level difference between like Elrond and Durin and Nori and the Mystics and the Wanderer Gandalf, and everyone was just kind of like a person. So it just felt like it felt flat.
The only character that didn't feel like that, to a lesser extent, Halbrand,
Right.
but to the greater extent, Adar, because he was
Right.
complex. He
He
was
had
like
depth.
he was inherently good that's been corrupted to evil. You know what
Yeah.
I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, it was.
Adar and Halbrand to a certain extent were complex in the sense that both were in some ways
They had a struggle. They had a struggle.
and they
Yeah.
were in some ways lowly, pathetic people. You saw Halbrand, he's like this lowly blacksmith in Numenor, and he was stranded in the ocean. He was just like this struggling guy barely holding it together, but he's supposed to be this great Maiar, leader, Dark Lord, whatever. He's supposed to be this powerful entity. And then obviously Adar's the same. He's like an elf with a certain amount of charm, and as an elf he's immortal or whatever, but he's also like this corrupted, dirty guy digging a ditch with a bunch of orcs, and he's got that kind of dual nature. So both these people were really interesting and really,
But the thing is, like, honestly, like, I can see where they took the Halbrand Sauron character, and from lore, right? Like he after the defeat of Morgoth, he turned a new leaf. Maybe he was trying, and again, like the struggle of trying to be, trying to be better, trying to go back to the light. Right? That's interesting.
Right.
That should have been a way longer struggle for him. It should not have been like, I'm Sauron in the last season.
Yeah.
Particularly if they're like thinking about stretching this out over 5 seasons, like they're saying.
Yeah.
So this was the final thought, though. The idea that if Sauron put it to her, like, if we would have hooked up, I would have bound myself to the light. Hence, I would be good. Hence, it's Galadriel's fault that the whole Middle Earth.
Right. Like she seems to have no ability inside her to forgive him or to conceive of a scenario where he might actually be like remorseful of his past and wanting to turn over a new leaf and become one with the one light of Iluvatar or whatever. He said he came back to the one or whatever, and she's like, no, she was having none of it.
Right. Which again is weird because like she's an elf, which is cool, but he's a Maiar. He should, I mean, really, like if he wanted to, he could just, like kind of take her out with Galadriel. Maybe in the next season they're going to soften her up a little bit, but there's like no repentance, no nothing with this character.
We just don't like her. I mean, she was kind of heartless with Adar, who I felt natural sympathy towards.
Yeah, I know, it's weird.
And and even Sauron a little bit. It's like, he was under the spell of Morgoth, and he was the servant of Morgoth, and then he realized the error of his ways. And this, I mean, maybe if she softened a little bit towards him, he wouldn't have turned so afoul of, you know what I mean? Like,
but that's what I'm saying. This was this is like implied that like this is the pivotal moment in Sauron's development that. If Galadriel would have like been like, oh hey, I see the good in you, like pull the Luke Skywalker, I feel the good in you, come back to the light,
right?
That maybe like this whole like War of the Ring thing could have been avoided.
You know?
You know what I'm talking about?
Right.
All the death, like arguably because Galadriel was such a heartless bitch watching the scene, right?
Right.
She cost millions and millions of lives.
Yeah. She could
because of her like being unforgiving. This is like this is a travesty right here. I mean, like thinking about it, like again, maybe Sauron is evil, but the implied subtext of this scene is that
it's like, I'm going to be unforgiving, and therefore this guy's going to end up bringing war upon Middle Earth. And
yes, twice.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Crazy. Yeah.
The whole creation of the rings, right? With Galadriel giving her brother's dagger for the creation of the rings, right? Indicated that her shield maiden days are over. I think that was symbolic of that,
right?
You know, which again, I hope so. I hope they look at this first episode like the people from Always Sunny in Philadelphia looked at the first season, or the first season. The way that the Always Sunny people looked at it, it's like, okay, this is all right, but this is what we need to do from here on out. We need to bring in Danny DeVito. We need the Danny DeVito character in season 2 to really set this series off. I mean, I'm giving it one more season. You know, I mean, it's interesting enough to where I'm invested in the next season. But
right. I heard it's 2 years off though. That'd be crazy if that's true.
They better rush it because I don't know how interested people are going to be.
People are going to be like, oh, this again?
Numerous rewatches.
But they better really impress us and if season 2 episode 1 comes around and it's the same kind of bullshit and it's like they didn't listen to us, it's a slap in the face, I'll be like, these people.
Yeah, no, but, you know what, honestly, I hope they don't double down. I hope they're like,
yeah, you know, they might double down, like, we can make it even stupider. Check this out.
Yeah, and look, it's not too late to course correct.
Yeah, people will appreciate it. They'll buy your merch.